Good morning, colleagues. Hope everybody is well. Slight echo in the room, but I'm sure that'll get sorted. So welcome to the Health and Wellbeing Board for Shropshire. For those that don't know me, I'm Simon Whitehouse. I'm Chief Executive Officer with NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and co-chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Firstly, would just want to say welcome to Councillor Kidd, Councillor Horton and Councillor Bentic. Looking forward to working with you over the coming years, and Councillor Bentic, very much looking forward to co-chairing the Health and Wellbeing Board with you. I'm really clear that the common aim in terms of improving the outcomes for the population of Shropshire that we all work on behalf of and strive for is a real common goal in terms of that, and a real focus of this leadership. So really looking forward to working with you over the coming term. On that point, would also just want to say thank you and make sure that we minute for Councillor Motley, who was the co-chair previously. We just want to record that in terms of her support, both for the Health and Wellbeing Board and for the work that she did for the population of Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin as well, please. The meeting is live streamed and recorded, and members of the public will be able to see and hear the audio in terms of that. On that basis, if you're speaking and you're sitting around the table, it'd be really helpful. Just remind people, press the right button on the microphone and the red light will come on, so that then we can hear you more clearly in here, but it also means that people on Teams can hear you. And then when you finish speaking, press the red button again and that will go off. And when you come in to speak, if given we've got new colleagues and new partners sitting around the table, if you could just introduce yourself briefly in terms of name and organisation, that would be helpful, please. Given it's a new committee, I do think it's probably helpful that we do just go around the room and do brief introductions. If for no other reason, it also gets people used to pressing the buttons and using the technology as well. And the way that Lynn's looking at me, I'll probably go this way first, so that she's got time to decide which set of microphones she wants to use in that space and how many microphones she wants to use. So if I go round to my right and come round to Councillor Bentic first.
Thank you, Simon, for that welcome and introduction. I'm Bernie Bentic. I'm portfolio holder for Health and Public Protection at Shropshire Council.
Louisa Jones, not what my job title is. Louisa Jones, business support partnerships, Shropshire Council.
Michelle Dulson, committee officer for Shropshire Council.
Mark Trentfield, Public Health Intelligence Analyst for Shropshire Council.
Gordon Coshane, Public Health Consultant for Shropshire Council.
Heather Kidd, leader of Shropshire Council, long-time member of HOSC.
Councillor Ruth Houghton, portfolio holder for social care, adults and children.
Laura Tyler, Service Director for Commissioning for Shropshire Council.
Paula Bickley, Associate Director for Strategy and Partnerships at SAF.
And good morning, my name is Nigel Lee. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for the Integrated Care Board in Shropshire, and also dual role as Director of Strategy at SAF.
I'm Marie Speak, Head of Service Housing Population, Shropshire Council.
Good morning, Claire Parker, Director of Strategy and Development for the ICB.
Good morning, everybody. Superintendent Jamie Dunn, Commander of Shropshire Local Policing Area and also Chair of the Community Safety Partnership.
Lynn Corley, Chief Officer, Healthwatch Shropshire.
Rachel Robinson, Exec Director of Public Health, working across Shropshire Council and the ICB, and apologies to Lynn because it was me with the microphone.
Thank you. Jackie, could I just ask you to press the button to turn the microphone on?
I think, should we swap with
And just to colleagues online, whilst we're just sorting the technology out in the room, if you just do the same, please just introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Paula Mawson, Service Director for Communities and Customer at Shropshire Council. Laura.
Good morning, everybody. Laura Fisher, Head of Housing, Resettlement, Independent Living at Shropshire Council. Jess.
Good morning, everybody. Jess Edwards, Business Insight and Intelligence Manager, but also covering public health, Shropshire Council.
Thank you very much. The challenge that colleagues, all of us have of remembering our job title and suddenly put on the spot of, please can you now speak out loud. Look, new committee formed, new venue and location as well. So bear with us whilst we work through in terms of just making sure the technology works and Teams work and the screens work, but all good in that space. Agenda and papers have been published online. So colleagues have had the ability to access and view those. I understand there'll be a couple of presentations this morning and they'll be shown on the screens as well. As ever, if you wish to engage and interject in the conversation, just make an indication and we'll come to you so that we can manage that flow of conversation and discussion in the best way. We've got a full agenda and some really important items, so looking forward to getting into that as we work through. Let me just make sure that we do the business bits of the meeting first, if that's okay as well. In terms of apologies, we've received apologies from David Crosby, Chief Officer of Shropshire Partners in Care, from Claire Horsfield, Directors of Operations and Chief AHP at Shropshire Community Services, and from Tanya Miles, Exec Director of People at Shropshire Council. Are there any other apologies that we're aware of or need to be notified of at all, please? No. Okay, thank you. In terms of disclosable pecuniary interests, just a reminder to all colleagues on the committee and on the Health and Wellbeing Board that we need to make sure that we declare and present any declarations. They're recorded on the Register of Interests, and if those become a conflict, as chair, we'll have the conversation in terms of if we get to a decision-making process, what you need to do in that space, but we'll manage that actively through the meeting. In terms of the minutes of the last meeting, just to recognise that the last meeting that was planned on the 10th of April was cancelled due to being in the pre-election period for the local elections. But we do have the minutes from the previous meeting that we need to go through and confirm, and then I need to sign. So these are from the 13th of February. I'm going to trust that they're an accurate record unless anybody wants to raise anything with me in terms of corrections to them. On that basis, could I ask that somebody that was at the meeting proposes them to be approved, please? Thank you, Rachel, and somebody seconds them. Thank you, Claire. So accept those and we'll sign those at the end of the meeting, accepted as a true record. In terms of public question time, we've had one question, and on that basis, I'd like to invite Mr. Palmer to come and read out his question, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the 12th of May 2025, the inspirational Jess Phillips MP, Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, announced a national near £20 million investment boost in life-saving support via specialist services for victims of domestic abuse. Wendy Bullman's latest report to this meeting, item 5, relates that every £1 extra invested in specialist domestic abuse services could yield a £9 return in local public sector savings. Will the board discuss and/or express opinions on an idea of locally raising much needed additional funding for specialist domestic abuse support services? Perchance, Shropshire Council could increase tenfold its Licensing Act 2003 statutory annual fees for public licensed premises. These currently range from just a measly £100 Band A to a drop in the ocean £350 annual fee for a Band E premises with a non-domestic rateable value of £125,001 and above. Add a feminist additional zero to those, and we're getting somewhere, showing our local progressive stripes aplenty.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Palmer, and for joining us this morning as well. A portfolio holder, Councillor Horton, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Palmer, for your question. Shropshire Council is currently managing an unprecedented financial position as budgeted for with the medium-term financial strategy approved by Council on the 29th of February 2024 and again on the 27th of February 2025. These are detailed in our monitoring position presented to Cabinet monthly. This demonstrates that significant management action is required over the remainder of the financial year and beyond to ensure the Council's financial survival. Statutory services continue to be funded, but reallocation of additional funding remains a challenge. In terms of funding for domestic abuse, the Council's Domestic Abuse Strategic Lead keeps abreast of the funding we receive from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to comply with our statutory duty. We are working alongside the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner with a view to ensuring our needs assessments and commission services are becoming aligned. The team also work hard to maximise other funding opportunities, for example, working with colleagues across West Mercia to access funding awarded to community safety partnerships to tackle serious violence. On average, across West Mercia, domestic abuse was a factor in 50% of all serious violence. Shropshire Council took the lead on a West Mercia-wide project that is providing fully funded sessions across education and community settings to young people aimed at addressing the factors that lead to domestic abuse and serious violence. Staff working in schools and across those community groups are also provided with sessions to assist them in understanding how best to support the young people who access these sessions. The team ensured we commissioned services to deliver an all-inclusive offer so young people with disabilities and special educational needs can also access the intervention. The team have previously looked to the Youth Endowment Fund, Children Affected by Domestic Abuse Fund and other opportunities as they present themselves and will keep working on funding applications as they arise. After a successful application, Homes England has awarded the Council with funding from the Single Homeless Accommodation Programme, and we have secured 3 properties with some of this funding to house very complex single victims or survivors of domestic abuse with a history of homelessness and other disadvantages, generally substance misuse, mental health and some offending history. The programme also came with revenue funding, so we have commissioned a peer-led organisation to deliver peer mental support, whilst also coordinating a multi-agency response to those living in the accommodation. This programme is being delivered taking a Housing First-led model, which provides intensive, person-centred, holistic support that is open-ended. Our sanctuary scheme is part funded by the Domestic Abuse Grant and part funded by the Homeless Prevention Grant. This enables us to provide all eligible victims of domestic abuse with a security assessment and any target hardening to reduce the need for them and any children to flee to safe accommodation. We deliver alongside West Mercia Police and Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service. It is worth noting that funding opportunities external to the Council can come into various departments and people, so some opportunities are missed. The Council are considering a single central point to support us to be more successful in applications. With regards to licensing, fees set under the Licensing Act 2003 are statutory fees set by central government. Shropshire Council is unable to revise the fees set, as this is the responsibility of central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you, Councillor Horton. Mr. Palmer, you are absolutely more than welcome to stay for the rest of the agenda, but understand you may step out at some point. The next part of the agenda links directly to some of this question as well, so you'd probably will want to stay for that aspect, but you're more than welcome to stay for the entirety of the meeting, of course. Okay, so thank you for that, colleagues. We move into the main items for discussion on the agenda. Just to remind board members and colleagues online, we've always looked to bring a focus to a particular topic area. And so we've got 3 areas now that are the main items for discussion this morning. We'll then move into the areas for discussion by exception, and then the reports that are for information only. So the agenda is structured to try and enable us to have the time for the conversation debate on the areas that we've put up front on the agenda, with the theme this morning being around the focus being on vulnerable communities. So on that basis, I'm going to assume that colleagues have read all of the papers in the pack. So when presenting, don't feel the need to present the paper, but let's bring out the areas that are the main bits for conversation and discussion, and then let's get into that conversation and discussion. First agenda item is on domestic abuse, and Wendy, who sneaked in after I'd done the introductions and gone around the table, Sean, I think you've done the same. I'm going to come to you, Wendy, if that's okay, to lead us out on this agenda item. And if you could just do an introduction as well for you, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Have I pressed the right button? The right button. Perfect. Hi, I'm Wendy Bullman. I'm Shropshire Council's Domestic Abuse Strategic Lead. This is my first time presenting here, so apologies if I stumble over words and do or say anything wrong. So thought I'd put that out there straight away. And thank you for putting the presentation up. I've only just sent it to you, so I appreciate that. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So as you've said, hopefully everybody has read the paper, so I don't intend to go into the paper into detail. The main thing that we're looking to do is to remind everybody that the paper has been drawn upon the needs assessment. The most recent needs assessment that we conducted, we did in-house, we did it by ourselves. Again, that was our first time at doing that as a domestic abuse prevention team. So what I've shown you in the papers actually is the executive summary from our first needs assessment that we did in 2022, and then I've given you the full report of what we've done in 2024, so that you can see not only the difference in approach that was taken, but also that some of the recommendations haven't changed, because no real work has been done in the health area to do that. We are letting everybody know, obviously, that it's widespread, it's across the county, there is a lot happening, but also hopefully you've got the feel that we don't know everything, because there's a lot of information missing. There's a lot of organisations that are not collecting the data, but it is widespread and it does require that coordinated response, and specifically a coordinated response across the health sector as well as other areas. And you as a Health and Wellbeing Board are critical in shaping that response for us. If we can move to the next slide, thank you. The key findings around the needs assessments and the work that we do on a day-to-day basis, and the SHAP, which is that single homelessness accommodation programme that was mentioned just now, really highlights that mental health specifically is one of the most common disabilities amongst victims of domestic abuse. Now, when we phrase the word mental health, we know that for health professionals, that's kind of like, well, what levels, and here, that and the other. But actually for the general public, it's kind of irrelevant, and we need to try and break down some of those barriers and accesses to any level of mental health, because for us in our homes, mental health just means mental health. We understand it has to sit within a system, but we need to understand that system better, so that the survivors out in the big wide world and the perpetrators also that have mental health issues are able to access services. We know that there were 114 suspected suicides between 2020 and 2022 that were linked to domestic abuse, and we work with our colleagues, Gordon, who's here, and Sean, in different areas around suicide and around substance use and other things like that. So that's but 114 suspected suicides. And if we pause on 114 people for one moment, we're actively doing domestic abuse homicide reviews, as they're still called at the moment, or domestic abuse related death reviews, as they will change too soon. Not sure if that's actually formally happened, which is about looking at more in depth about people that have died as a result of, or it's believed as a result of, domestic abuse. And we're actively sitting on quite a few of those at the moment. So it's not getting any less. We're not saying it's necessarily getting any more, but we're more aware of it now. So we're more able to look at it. Survivors are consistently telling us they need improved mental health support, they need tailored services across the health system, and that they need greater professional awareness. I could give a case study of a whole day that was spent yesterday going around trying to get different mental health, different primary care providers, different people from hospitals, ambulance services. Just yesterday, we touched upon 4, 5, 6 different services trying to get one particular person the support that they need. We were unsuccessful. So because we haven't got the coordinated response. So that's not a criticism, it's the system as it is currently is just not working to the best that it could be. If we can move to the next slide, please. Move mine, I'll be able to see what I've said. So yeah, we wanted to make sure that the report that we prepared aligns with the Health and Wellbeing Board's priorities. So it does fit within the areas of building strong and vibrant communities, strengthening the workforce and reducing inequalities. So what we're saying there, what is as it says on the tin really, if we can actually support our victims and survivors as well as our perpetrators through our health coordinated response, then we are going to increase all of those things. We're going to impact the communities. We're going to strengthen our workforce because our workforce is going to be more skilled to respond earlier. So we're going to reduce the top end need for crisis intervention because we're going to get that earlier support right down at the beginning, both for perpetrators and victims. As I say, the report, it talks about victims, but we absolutely know and want to work with perpetrators in the first instance. And the inequalities is around that inequality. A rural area, access to services is really, really tricky. You know, actually getting anywhere and seeing anybody is really tricky. Having people come out and do face-to-face since COVID, it's really hard. People are services are still not doing face-to-face in the way that they were. So there's lots of inequalities about understanding people's health, etc. as well, and understanding the impact of long-term trauma on somebody from a health perspective. You'll have pockets of areas that really understand that, and then you'll have other pockets that just don't see it and see, well, the domestic abuse was years ago, so this has nothing to do with that. So there's lots of ways that we hope what we're looking to hope to do it does align with your priorities. And then for the next slide, it's just the overview really about what we're recommending. The overarching recommendation is to ask the board to task, I'm reading it from my report now because I can remember exactly how I worded it, to task the domestic abuse leads from across all health partnerships and the workforce to actually come along to the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board, which is the strategic board that as a local authority we have a statutory duty to run around safe accommodation, but actually our board is a lot wider than that and looks at the whole work of domestic abuse. So we're asking you to support and task those leads to come along to that board so that we can strengthen our local response to domestic abuse and reduce that long-term impact that I've talked about for individuals and for services. And by doing that, these recommendations will fall out of that. We will work on embedding the awareness, we'll work on prioritising mental health, investing in trauma-informed practice and training, and the strengthening of the data so we can really see exactly what we do have. So those are our recommendations. And then the final slide really is about what you can do as a board, which is about that. If you could just move that slide on for me, that'd be great. Thank you. Is about championing domestic abuse, not having champions, because in agencies and services, if you have a DA champion, people just say, oh, great, we'll chuck it to that person. We don't need to do anything now. We're not saying that. We're talking about as a system, champion domestic abuse as a public health issue. Let it known that it is as huge as it is. Support integrated commissioning approaches actually come together. So rather than us all doing a bit of commissioning here, there and everywhere, actually let's come together and do it together. We're in the process of doing commissioning out there. There's a public survey out at the moment, market engagement events coming along, and we're encouraging all agencies to come, not just people that are providers. We're asking everybody because there's different ways to do what we need to do. We just need to look at them And we have worked, and we've put here to ensure we want you to ensure that survivor voices shape our design. We started back in February. We had our lived experience advisory group. We had a blank piece of paper. We said, you tell us what you want us to go out to the general public and ask. We didn't want to say, this is what we're going to ask, what do you think? We literally just flipped it. So we've started with them. They gave us the questions. They sat with us when we devised the survey. That's gone out. They will be front and centre at market engagement. They will help us write that service specification. But we want the Health and Wellbeing Board to also help us with that, to bring in more survivors. We haven't just got health survivors, we've got a raft, but we could do with more health survivors or perpetrators. We're interested in their voices as well. What could we have done different that might have helped them change their behaviour earlier, having less impact? Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy, a lot in that, both in terms of the papers and the presentation and how you brought that to life. So thank you for that. Let me open this up for conversation and discussion. Claire.
Thank you, Wendy, and I'm really pleased to see domestic abuse at the Health and Wellbeing Board, a former trustee of a women's refuge, so really interested in this area. I think there's a few things that we could probably do to support from a health perspective. I think we need to link you much more strongly into the neighbourhood working, particularly around the Women's Health Hub, not recognising it's not just women, around domestic abuse, but I think we could definitely link you into that MDT approach to make sure that your victims are getting the right level of support and helping with that. So I'll catch up with you afterwards to do that. I think we need to do more training for primary care, particularly general practice, and I will pick that up with our medical director and through our education lead GPs to see whether we could do some further training around that and how we identify that. I previously worked in Sandwell and we had a scheme where we had link workers around domestic abuse that if GPs were asking the question, they got somebody that they could then refer to, which was linked to Sandwell Women's Aid. So whether we could have a look at what that might look like in the future. The health inequalities bit, I'm really keen on, and again, we've got a health inequalities lead. I'd like to link you into that role to make sure that we're thinking about those inequalities when we're looking at domestic abuse. And then finally, I suppose a question around perpetrators, because linking in with work around perpetrators, real concern about young men, social media, incel, and I think we're storing up potential perpetrators of the future if we don't do some work around education and with schools. And I'm just wondering whether there's any thoughts about how we go about that. I know it's a national issue, not just a local issue, but maybe we need to think about that as well. So just a few comments from me.
Thank you, Claire. Wendy, when you respond, I just wonder if you could also pick up the iris bit that's in the papers as well, please, and just maybe expand a bit on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I made a note of that. So the primary care training, we have met just this week actually with Telford and Wrekin Council and Naomi Roche. Roche, have I pronounced that? Roche, sorry. I've known her for years and I can still not pronounce her name. So yeah, I met with her actually and Jordan from Telford earlier this week around the primary care work and around not doing two GPs and not telling them, okay, we're going to create this little package and off you go, well, you need to come and do some training. And around that pitch of the IRIS project, which is in the papers, and the IRIS project is a nationally recognised, very researched and brilliant programme. And I've been in Shropshire 10 years, and 10 years ago I was saying, can we bring the IRIS project here, please? So, you know, it's something that we've talked about and I'm quite passionate about. I've had costings for it across Shropshire, across Telford and across both from IRIS themselves. To show us what the costings are. I think that's the approach that I would like to see us go to. It is not a cheap initial startup, but long-term benefits are huge. For example, Herefordshire Council adopted the IRIS project 18 months or 2 years ago now. They were fortunate in getting a grant from central government to do one of the pilot schemes, so they were able to run it. So what they had was from a GP practice who had made 2 referrals over about 5 years, I think it was, they had 66 referrals within that first year, actually, of people that were coming forward and doing it. And it is exactly that. It's having a trained specialist who is attached to GP practices, who is able to provide direct support to the victims, because we know GP practices have a lot of work to do. And the thought of them doing what they need to do to adequately support a victim is too much. So I would like us to pick that up, and hopefully that's something we can do through the DO Partnership Board and through your links. In terms of the question around perpetrators, can you remind me, because I know it's perpetrator, I can't think exactly what it was.
It was, and thank you for telling me it was Iris. I couldn't remember the name when I was thinking about it. It's really about all the noise around young men.
Yes, thank you.
And sort of social media influences.
Thank you. So the project that we've got running that is funded from the serious violence money that comes through the Community Safety Partnership, that is exactly that. That is working with 3 organisations, West Mercia Women's Aid as the lead organisation, but with 2 other organisations called Everyone's Invited and The Right Path. And it is the Right Path and Everyone's Invited work across the West Midlands in various areas and different schools. And they are absolutely focused on the misogyny. They're focused on all the Andrew Tate agenda work. They are talking directly to young people. They are a youth-based organisation. So they're in schools, they're doing workshops and information to those young people. And from that, they're getting good conversations, some of which aren't very nice. One of the examples they brought to the table was how young people in schools have rape lists, and sorry to use that word in a public forum, but it is what young people are saying. So they have lists that they class as rape lists, and the girls want to be on the rape list. And when the language was challenged, the boys were very much like, oh my God, no, we don't mean it like that, because the language wasn't understood what they really meant by a rape list. They were just, in their eyes, it was just a bit of fun and a bit of play, and the girls just wanted to be on it because it meant they were popular and everybody liked them. So the challenge is going back in there, actually saying, well, actually what that means, think about what that is, think about what that language means, how you interpret that. So we're absolutely doing that. It's funded now until the end of this financial year, until March. Who knows what will happen, because we don't know what's going to happen with serious violence money as to whether that can continue. I do have stats and data on what support has already been done and how many schools they've accessed it. It's across West Mercia, but they've done some good work in our own local areas as well. So I can bring that at a later date if that's needed.
Thanks, Wendy. Really comprehensive. Councillor Bentic.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Wendy, for that presentation. Can I pick up on the mental health crisis aspects of this subject? In that. It's been identified that domestic abuse was linked to, I think it was 114 deaths. And the Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust has a crucial role to play in this area, and have recently announced changes in their crisis response mechanisms. And secondly, there is a recognition that urgent and emergency care centres are suboptimal places for those with mental health crises to be cared for, and yet it was 10 times the number seen in the Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals compared with the other departments in Shropshire. And so has there been any conversation around the Midland Partnership Foundation Trust's support in this area to those who are suffering mental health crises associated with domestic abuse?
Okay, so we've got a piece of work ongoing at the moment with public health with Gordon, who's sat next to me, and we are working with our providers around mental health, substance use and domestic abuse. So we're working with the commissioners and the providers in a collective set of workshops that we're working our way through to set up protocols to better respond, so that it's a quicker response and it's an easier pathway for people. So in essence, the answer is we're working on it. Is it working now? No, but we are working on it, and we have an active working group doing that, and we're meeting regularly. And Paul Gordon keeps creating different pathways, suggestions that then they don't quite work. So it is a huge job to try and make it work. I think substance use and domestic abuse are, I would say, 85% of the way there. We've pretty much nailed it. But getting into the health system, which comes back to my very first point, health is such a vast and wide thing that actually one pathway and one protocol doesn't fit. Issues around GDPR and all of those things come into play. But we're absolutely working on it. With MPFT, they are at the table as well, Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust. They are at the table with us. And it is recognised that the crisis response is not the best at this time in terms of domestic abuse, but it's a work in progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kidd.
I'd just quite like to ask a question, which is you went through a case where you couldn't find actually anyone to help you yesterday and spending most of the day yesterday doing that. What do you do when you can't find that support? Because that's a major gap in what we're all doing, and it's about partnership working. And on top of that, I'm just interested in how the linkage happens between the police and what you do and so on, because all of that is a vital part, because quite often they'll present to the police in one way or another.
So in relation to the specific case yesterday, the police were actively involved and right at the forefront with it, and we were working really closely with them. It's a known incident and a known case. But in answer to this section about, well, what do you do when you can't? She went home. We closed the door, and the risk was still there. I'm not operational. However, I'm on the phone to the person who's been doing the support at 6 o'clock to make sure they're okay, because they're doing the support and they've left this person knowing that anything could happen. The police have put a massive protocol in place at the end of the day yesterday for this particular person and sent it out to all emergency services with this is what you need to do if. We're now waiting for that if, so that a system can kick in. But we need to do better, and that's fine. That's why we're here.
Jackie.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think the work you do around lived experience and bringing that into Shape Services is inspirational and brilliant. So on a voluntary sector perspective, I've had some feedback from Age UK. So they were saying that they feel that domestic abuse is very underreported and not recognised for older people. And what they've usually done, especially in areas where there's coercive control and emotional abuse, has done it through the safeguarding route. But as the person's got deep capacity, it's all a bit. So they're now raising issues through domestic abuse route. And just wanted then to say, so kind of like you said, early identification is raising the report, but this needs to include older people and the stats there, especially where they're saying around a life change event, onset of illness or dementia, which is again, the mental health stuff that you've talked about. So is there going to be any more enhanced data relating to over 65s, as the focus is often on children and families? The other thing was one, we're talking about domestic homicide. It's 60% of over 65s of that number. Again, triggers seem to be life-changing events. So really, it was just about that, bringing the older age group into that.
So yeah, absolutely. We absolutely want to bring the older age group into it. Our survey that's gone out, we are asking people of all ages from 7 up to fill it in, and the areas live from our survey, we've had 17 65 to 74-year-olds fill it in, 2 75 plus, and one other. I'm not sure what that means from an age group, but so we absolutely want to target that. So if you could, we've passed the survey across you guys, so hopefully they will have taken part in that and given us that information, and hopefully they will come along to the market engagement. I link with Carrie Bauer, who's a leading national person. She used to work for Age UK National Office. She now works for Hourglass, and I link with her often about the older people and what we need to do with that. And it absolutely brings it back to that understanding of what is mental health, because it then gets pushed around, and capacity is one of our biggest barriers when it comes to domestic abuse and that provision. As soon as somebody's 18 plus, under 18 it's relatively easy. Over 18 it becomes a whole different ballgame.
Thank you. I'll take Lynn.
Thank you. Hope it's working. Just a few things from me. Obviously, this is an important issue for Healthwatch, and it's something that's very a personal issue for me, but also through Healthwatch, a professional issue as well. So it'd be really helpful maybe if we could have a chat about maybe something that we could do to support you to engage and involve people. I think one of my comments was going to be about the diverse communities across Shropshire and the different approaches that they have to domestic abuse and their different expectations of what they can be entitled to if they're a victim, but also that level of isolation if they try to raise their voice. And then the other thing, having worked with teenage boys, for me, I think it's about also being aware that for that group, sometimes this can be used as a weapon against them. So, quite naive young boys might be be accused of doing something that they haven't done as a sort of a way of getting revenge for them in a relationship. So for me, it's about how we support all parties within this and about how we promote what makes a healthy relationship, to try and put that positive spin on it, because a lot of people wouldn't like to consider themselves in an abusive relationship, but they might recognize if it's not a healthy one. And so, yeah, happy to be part of conversations about this.
Just going to bring Rachel in for one final comment, then come back to you, Wendy, for a final piece, and then we'll go through the recommendations, if that's okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Wendy, for bringing this, because I think it's such an important piece of work, and there's some really stark figures in here. And I think the fact that some of the recommendations we haven't been able to move forward gives us, I think that was one of the things that I wanted to come back to. I think they're definitely, fully supporting the recommendations, particularly dealt making sure that we've got the right people on there to move these forward. I think so I think there's a commitment, and I know we'll come to that in terms of the recommendations, to make sure that we have a continued commitment around that group, not just in terms of looking at these recommendations, but that we take these forward, because this reports both into the CSP and into Health and Wellbeing Board, and I think it's important that we make sure that we move them forward. I think it'd be worth bringing. I was going to raise the joint working that's happening around drug and alcohol, domestic abuse and mental health, and that's a really important piece of work. And again, probably through DELT, but then back to the CSP, and here we need to be given the assurance that that's moving forward in those pathways. I wonder if we can link in that lessons learned from the case that you've described into that, because I think there's a clear story there, and we need to make sure that we're actually resolving that in the pathways that have been described. And I think we need to be escalated. If there's issues that we're not able to resolve, I think we need to be quickly escalating. And look at Jamie from a kind of a CSP point of view, but also from, I think, the Health and Wellbeing Board, because we jointly fit in. The neighbourhood piece, I agree. We've got to link this into the mechanisms that we're putting in place to reach into our communities, to get messages out. So I think there's a real opportunity. The final bit for me was just around workforce. I think that's really important. You've rightly said this is a priority of the board. I think in terms of the board, we're moving a lot of areas forward, and we were having a conversation this morning about things like the AAA. This board is kind of committed to that work of what we do around health and wellbeing in our communities, how everybody's our eyes and ears. I think there's a real opportunity for us to do collective work around that as organisations. And so I think I'm wondering if on a future agenda we need to be bringing workforce back to the board. What are we actually doing to make sure we've got a comprehensive programme around our priorities, to make sure we've got the right training, and we're getting those messages out. We've got a real opportunity through our partnership to get these messages out, and domestic abuse is one element of that, and we need to make sure we're layering that up. So I think it's just a reflection back that I don't think we've had that conversation. This needs to be part of it. We need to promote that.
I've got Ben and Paula who also want to come in as well, so I'm going to bring Ben and Paula in online. So Ben.
Yeah, just very quickly. Thanks for the report, Wendy. Very, very insightful. It sounds like you're getting the input you need from us, but if there's any help, if you need further engagement, then do reach out. We can see if we can provide more support if needs be.
Thank you, Ben. For those not able to see on the screen, Ben's from MPUFT, so Midlands Partnership Trust, hence the offer from Ben. Paula?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add for the committee's benefit that I also chair the Early Help and Prevention Partnership Board. And Wendy, on the back of the presentation and report today, I'd be really keen to pick up a further conversation with you about how we can support this work aligned to the work that the DELB are doing. I think, there's an ever increasing need for more preventative work in this space, and it's how can we, through our broad partners that we have on that partnership board, support that. And I'm particularly thinking of things like the youth partnership, the youth strategy work, to support young people's understanding of what healthy relationships are and some of those kind of signs and red flags that potentially they're getting into a situation that's difficult for them, and where they can get support to help them work that through. So really keen to pick up a further discussion, Wendy, and thanks for the report and presentation today. Thank you.
Indeed. Final comments from you.
Okay, thank you. Just two, if that's okay. Just wanted to come back on the teenage boys. A lot of the work that everyone's invited and the Right Path do is not about blaming boys. The culture of that, in my opinion, is not right. We cannot blame boys for that. We're teaching boys and girls what a healthy relationship looks like from an equal standpoint. It's not you're doing wrong and you've got to do this. It's not that. So we're absolutely trying to tackle it from that angle. In regard to our communities, we're working with our Eastern European communities, we work with our refugee communities, we understand the differences. We also understand from our survey that it's recognised wider that our services are not necessarily responsive enough in understanding the different cultures, and that's from a farming culture as well as a refugee culture. So it's not just about people that didn't originate in this country, it's about everything around us. So we're making sure that we do pick up all of those things. Absolutely happy to come to Early Help Partnership Board. I sit on that anyway board, so thank you for that. And yeah, open to meet with you, Ben, at some point to see and further that discussion, really. So thank you for that.
So, Wendy, thank you. Thank you for bringing the agenda item, for the paper, the presentation, and then for leading and facilitating the conversation. The case study example in terms of bringing that to life around the situation we were dealing with yesterday, and Councillor Kidd focusing on that absolutely makes that very real, doesn't it, in terms of where we're at in this space. The board have a really clear recommendation. Before I get to that, I think there have been a number of offers and proposals, and we need to just make sure that we capture those and we don't further cause further fragmentation when the offers are all intended with a how do we join things up. So Wendy, I'll leave that with you if that's okay, to join the dots in that space so that we don't have lots of things happening in different areas. The other offer then would be, I think this would be a really good topic and area for the Integrated Care Board at a development session or at the resident story piece to think about as well, because it goes across so many different areas and so many different partners. Would make that offer to add to the list of offers that you'd got in terms of coming and talking at that point. And if you, between Rachel and Nigel, if you could link in, we'll find an opportunity for that to happen. On that basis, the board are asked to note the update and task the domestic abuse leads from across the health partnership and across the health and wellbeing board partners to come to the domestic abuse local partnership board to collaborate. The aim of that collaboration is to strengthen the local response to domestic abuse and reduce its long-term impact on individuals and services. I'm not proposing we put that to the vote because I think this is going to be unanimous, but I am going to look up just to make sure that all board members are comfortable and content to support that as drafted and as written, and we move forward on that basis. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Okay. I'm going to move us on then, if that's okay. And Mark, I think I'm coming to you now. We've got the draft pharmaceutical needs assessment.
Okay, I'll just try and share my screen. I think that's it. Right, is that loaded? Yeah, excellent. Right, so I'm just going to talk about the pharmaceutical needs assessment, or as I might refer to it, PNA.
So the reason that we're doing this is that all health and wellbeing boards have a statutory duty to do a P&A every 3 years, and the last one that we did was in 2022. This final version of the P&A has to be produced and published by the 1st of October 2025. And before I do that, we've got to do a 60-day public consultation. So the reason that we do a P&A is to look at the current future health needs of the county, to examine the current pharmaceutical service that is being provided, gather the views of residents and contractors, and identify any gaps or unmet needs. And the finished report, when it's actually done, will be used to plan future services, including any new contractors. So the report that I've done is quite lengthy, as you'd have seen from the minutes and the agenda that was sent out, and it's over 200 pages. So I've just put a contents page here, just showing some of the things that I've gone into and that I've looked at. But first thing to start with is what the current provision is. So I've done a couple of maps here. So on the left-hand side, I've got a map of the GP dispensing practices that operate in Shropshire. There's 17 of those. This middle map here shows the community pharmacies. There's 43 in Shropshire. So this is your big providers such as Boots, Rowlands, etc. And there's obviously also independent contractors as well. And then there can be distance selling pharmacies, but there's none that operate in Shropshire. And there's also appliance contractors, but again, there's none that operate in Shropshire. But both of those last two, there are ones that operate in Telford and Wrekin. So you can see that the dispensing practices tend to be more rural, and the community pharmacies tend to congregate more around the main towns, particularly Shrewsbury and Oswestry. So I looked at provision, and what I've done here is looked at the level of community pharmacies that we've got in Shropshire in comparison to previous years and in comparison to England. And then I've also looked at the community pharmacies plus dispensing GP practices as well. So we have 4 less community pharmacies in Shropshire since the last P&A was done. And as a result, there are more people per community pharmacy in Shropshire than England. So I think we've got 7,637 people per community pharmacy in Shropshire compared to 5,127 in England. And that has gone up since 2022. When you add in dispensing GP practices, the impact is slightly reduced, although Shropshire is still above the levels of England. And it's again increased since 2022. But dispensing GP practices do not quite provide the same level of service that community pharmacies do. So it's not the quite same level that we need to look at. And the current population projections predict that Shropshire's population is going to increase by 2028, which is the next P&A, and therefore it will be more demand on community pharmacies. So I've just put a table here just showing some of the services that community pharmacies offer. So all community pharmacies offer the 9 essential services that are down this left-hand table, and then they can choose to offer advanced services such as flu vaccination or pharmacy contraception service, and then they can also choose to offer additional services if they so want. It's down to the contractor whether to take those on. So I looked at some accessibility, and I've slightly updated this chart from what was sent out in the pack. But what I've put in this map is showing whether people can get to a community pharmacy within 10 minutes in a car. So the green areas on the map show the people that can get to a community pharmacy within 10 minutes. So I've also put those on the map as well. So this table also shows how people can get to a community pharmacy in different time periods by different transportation. So got around about 87% of Shropshire residents can get to a community pharmacy within 10 minutes in a car. But when you look at, say, walking, it drops to 42% of people, and public transport on a weekday morning is just 44%. And you've got particular challenges around public transport. And also the map shows that there's areas, particularly in the south of Shropshire and slightly in the north, where that would be an issue. And it might be that people can go to community pharmacies slightly over the border in Wales or in Staffordshire or down south in Worcestershire, but it is a bit of a challenge. I also looked within the full P&A, I looked at the levels of items that were dispensed. So within our community pharmacies over a year, we had nearly 5 million items that were dispensed by community pharmacies. Now, people don't have to go to a community pharmacy where they live. They could be going to ones when they actually live over the border. But I also looked at splitting the activity by our family hub areas. And I noticed that community pharmacies from the northwest family hub area, there was over 1 million items dispensed from that. But when you break it down by items per pharmacy, it's over 150,000 items per pharmacy. So it seemed to be much higher usage in the northwest family hub area. And I also looked at the southwest family hub. There were much less items dispensed at the southwest family hub area. It does have a smaller population, so when actually breaking it down by items per pharmacy and per head of population, it doesn't stand out as being any worse than other areas. I also, as a result of presenting this at the SHIP board, I was asked a question about dispensing distance selling pharmacies, and I was able to get hold of data for the last financial year that showed that of 6.5 million items that were prescribed by Shropshire GP practices, we had nearly 300,000 that were dispensed from distance selling pharmacies. And I noticed within the data that for some reason 16% of the items were dispensed from patients registered at Station Drive in Ludlow. And this was by far the highest practice for distance selling pharmacies. So I've not been able to get hold of data from previous years or comparing it to other areas, but that was something of note. I've also just looked at some of the levels of pharmacies that are signed up for each of these advanced and additional services and some of the activity I was able to get hold of. So we've got some services such as flu vaccination. All community pharmacies are signed up for that service. And we've got nearly 30,000 appointments for flu vaccination at community pharmacies. But some of the other services that community pharmacies can offer, there's much less pharmacies that are signed up for those services, and sometimes the activity has been very low. But in some occasions, it might be because those services can be provided by other providers. Within the report, I looked at other things such as care homes and looked at the provision. So one thing I noticed is that there's a significant number of care homes for adults and children in Shropshire, and they might need the services of community pharmacies or dispensing practices in order to get medicines dispensed or advice or removal of medicines. And there was a couple of things that I just noticed that aren't an issue, but they could be, and I just highlighted them. So we've got certain areas where there is only limited practices nearby for a number of nursing homes. And one thing I did notice, for example, is Bishop's Castle. There's just a community pharmacy there, but there's 3 care homes nearby, and it's the only community pharmacy within over 5 kilometres. So if there was a potential issue at that pharmacy, there would be a knock-on effect. As part of the survey at P&A, we did a resident survey. We had over 259 responses. It was weighted towards females, 65%, and there was very few people below the age of 45 who completed the survey. So a few things that I noticed. Around 40 to 50% of people said that they would like to visit pharmacy on a weekend, but from what we've been able to establish, there's very limited number of pharmacies that open then, and particularly on a Sunday. We had high levels of respondents who were not aware of certain services, such as sexual health or substance misuse services, but it could have been because those pharmacies didn't offer those services, or it could have been because those people might not have been the people that were being targeted, but there were certain other services which were more universal that people were still not aware of. 93% of people said that the pharmacy where their prescription is sent by their GP, but just 15% of respondents said they had used a delivery service. And the most cited reason for that was because they were unable to leave their own home. 27% said that they had used the new Pharmacy First service, which was a service launched, I think, in February 2024 for advice and treatment of some minor conditions, and 83% of those self-referred. The vast majority of people said that the advice that they received was very useful or useful. And just a small minority said it wasn't. Themes said that people found using pharmacies could save a lot of time in waiting to be seen by a GP, and that the pharmacies could be very helpful and had a good knowledge of medicines. 2/3 of people were very satisfied with pharmacy services. Small percent said that they were dissatisfied, but the main reasons for that were around opening hours or waits for medicines or them not being in stock. And again, there were lots of further comments that with praise for the staff and the time that was saved, although issues around opening hours, workload and staffing were mentioned. We also did a contractor survey asking contractors what they felt about the service. We had nearly 2/3 of them respond to the survey. We had some highlights such as 93% said that the pharmacy had free parking nearby, 89% said that the pharmacy had wheelchair access, and 93% had a consultation room available that had wheelchair access. But there were a couple of highlights around the more disabled people, with just 21% saying that they had a disabled toilet, 54% had an automatic door, and 36% had a hearing loop. So there could be some challenges for certain people. Half of the pharmacies had the ability for an online consultation, and 89% said they had the text messaging service for prescriptions being ready. All pharmacies had a closed consultation room, and the majority of pharmacies said they were currently providing or were intending to provide some of the advanced services. And the majority of contractors said that if they were not already providing services, they would be willing to provide them if they were commissioned. And screening services was one example of that. So in summary, the access to pharmacy services, there's 43 community pharmacies and 17 dispensing services in Shropshire. And 87% of residents are within a 10-minute car journey, but only 44% are within one of using public transport. Many localities are supported by GP practices that dispense to their patients, which normally reflect the opening hours of the practice, but they don't offer the full range of pharmacy services. There's limited opening hours, with most pharmacies now open on a Saturday morning, but just 2 in Shropshire are opening past 6 p.m. on a Saturday. Both of those are in Shrewsbury. And there's just 6 pharmacies that open on a Sunday at all. 4 of those are in Shrewsbury and 2 are in Oswestry. So there's some gaps. There's just 1 pharmacy which is in Oswestry, which is open past 9 p.m. on a weekday, and that's open until 11 p.m. So there's no pharmacies in Shropshire which open for 24 hours. There's certain services that there appears to be reasonable access to services commissioned by Public Health, but certain services do not operate at all pharmacies, and for some pharmacies the activity is very low. Within Shropshire, the current provision is there's more people per pharmacy in Shropshire than there is in England, and when you add in dispensing practices, the gap is reduced, but again, they don't quite offer the same level of service. And in order to access those, you would need an appointment, which doesn't reduce the pressure on GPs. Again, the number of pharmacies has dropped since the previous PNA, and therefore the ratio of patients per pharmacy has increased, and is predicted to increase in time. Again, there's only limited 100-hour pharmacies in Shropshire, and that's dropped since the previous PNA. And community pharmacies have taken on more roles as part of the pharmacy contract, which is aimed to take the pressure off GPs and hospitals, such as the Pharmacy First contract. So again, there's limited access at weekends and at night, particularly in the south of the county. Some services weren't very visible, and certain services, there seemed to be quite a large amount of people who didn't know about the services. Contractor survey said there was a large amount of willingness of the contractors who answered that they would provide more services if they were asked to, and it might be necessarily for further investigation if there are changes to the pharmacy provision in the county, particularly if there's further growth in the population. So the final steps of this is, after this, if it's approved by the board, we will open up a public consultation on the report, which will then be open for 60 days. And then I'll be able to make some changes to that and publish the report.
Thank you. And the level of detail and knowledge and insight, as ever, is fantastic. And linking that back in then to actually what does this mean for communities and what does that look like is really powerful in there. And certainly if we're thinking about the publication of the upcoming 10-year health plan and everything that we'll talk about in terms of neighbourhoods and the importance of neighbourhoods, we absolutely need to make sure that this is playing into those conversations that we have locally around what does that 10-year plan mean for the residents of Shropshire. So I'm going to open this up for conversations and discussion, and then we'll bring it back around to make sure that we give you the mandate to go out to consult. Councillor Bentinck first, and then Councillor Hull.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this very detailed analysis. Is there a pharmaceutical coordinating body for Shropshire? And if there is, what level of engagement have they had in the provision of comprehensive services, particularly in evenings, weekends and overnight? And have the Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals been involved in any of these discussions, as they will have pharmacy services which are available in principle for a 24-hour period?
I've worked as part of the PNA steering group with Peter from Community Pharmacy in Shropshire, Peter Prokova, sorry, and James Milner, who works with the ICB on pharmacy provision. And they have had quite an input into this piece of work, and I've had to use their expertise quite a lot because it's been a new area for me, and they've provided quite a lot of insight into this piece of work. I don't think we have involved the hospitals in this piece of work, because they offer a different level of service than would be expected from community pharmacies.
Thank you. But we have identified there's no 24-hour service, and sometimes the conditions may be such that residents and patients feel that they can't wait until the next opening of the routine services, and so inevitably some of them are going to end up at the urgent and emergency care centres, which of course is an important feature for the hospitals themselves as well as the residents. And have you been able to draw up or look at a potential solution to the current situation with regard to the availability of pharmacies throughout Shropshire?
So Mark, just before you come in on that, just recognising, Councillor, that Mark's remit is to draft the pharmaceutical needs assessment, not to solve the pharmacy issues.
Thank you.
Look, we'll pick that up through separate routes, but I wondered whether Nigel might want to come in and respond, and Claire might come in and respond. That might help with some of those aspects as well. That's okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo Chair's points. I think what a super piece of work, and I think at a time when we've got when we want to look at how we support people in rural areas, as well as obviously the demand across the county, and as Simon said, as you know, with the advent of the 10-year plan, we know that what we do in the community setting, what we want to do as neighbourhoods, is just utterly pivotal, and this is such a key part of it. I think there's a bit around looking at what pharmacies can provide, and perhaps just picking up Councillor Bentinck's question. I think it's important, and I know our ICB chief pharmacist works with pharmacy leads, whether that's looking at the different trusts, but also the community pharmacies. And I think it's possibly a question for Minesh as the chief pharmacist to look at what the opportunities are with the next phase, given some of the recommendations. And I suppose I would probably counter Councillor's view on the SAS, because I think the intention is to look at making sure that the acute hospitals and certainly emergency departments are used for the appropriate patients. Obviously, we have urgent treatment centres rather than emergency department, but I think it could be looked at in the frame. And I know that through the place boards, for example, and certainly one of the key neighbourhood planks of this year is about urgent community response. So I think the first call needs to be, how could we look at supporting a resident's or patient's needs in that urgent community response? The recourse, I think, to something different is should be the last resort. The only bit of, if I may, that I also think is a question you know may or may not be able to answer, but certainly when we looked at some of the variances in activity, you know, using some of the metrics that you did. And what you described was quite a big variance, for example, in the north. And I suppose the interesting question from that, which we may or may not be able to, is that because there's greater need in that population, or is there greater take up, and therefore the educations? And that I think is, again, it may not be a question we can answer today, but I think that's the next phase, as I say, especially built around how do we make sure that we build on those services at a community setting that have got to be either close to people's home, or, as we've heard there, with some of it actually provided in people's homes.
Do you want to respond to any of that, Mark?
It's very hard to look at things like that, because obviously you don't have to use the pharmacy that's nearest to your house. So it could be you're using a pharmacy nearest to your work as well, or it's very hard to know. You can't tell people where they have to go. So that's one of the things that I did think about, but I wouldn't know where to start with that.
I mean, yeah, and I think there is, so Nigel, your bit of, you know, the fact that James from our team's involved in this and is linked with Minesh, that's the bit now we say that how do we, as with the joint strategic needs assessment, how do we use the needs assessment to drive the future planning of services and care, and what does that look like? That's the principle behind this that gets in that space. So those questions are absolutely the right one from a commissioner's perspective. Nigel, we need to pick that up then with James and Minesh, as you said. I'm going to pick up Claire, Councillor Dulson, if you want to finish on this point, then I'll come back to you.
As a former community pharmacist of some 15 years and still a pharmacist on the register, I've got some professional interest in this, so we're definitely linking with our local pharmaceutical committee for Shropshire. They're very much involved, and Peter sits on the SHIP committee as well. So as part of that neighbourhood and place-based discussion, community pharmacy are absolutely in that. From a technical perspective, the hospital cannot dispense FP10 prescriptions, so there's no payment mechanism for that, so it would be really tricky to do that. For me, the reason for having a pharmaceutical needs assessment is so that we as a place can determine what services that we want to bring into the county. So should we want 24-hour pharmacies, we should be inviting applications for potentially new services to come in, should that be a requirement. So I think once the draft is approved, should that be approved today, and we've been out to consultation, I think we need to be much clearer, Chair, about what it is that we want to invite into the county for delivery of those services and the sort of services we should be commissioning. And then the final point is pharmacists will be coming out with prescribing qualifications. So all pharmacists will graduate as prescribers. So we need to be thinking, that's from next year, we need to be thinking in future how we commission local services as part of that neighbourhood approach to ensure that we're using those skills as part of that care closer to home process.
And that ability to reach into rurality of our communities in a different way, and the support there in terms of that health offer is going to be really key going forward. So thank you for that. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark, for a really interesting report around access and availability and also satisfaction. It was good to see both sides of that. I'm going to ask a comment from the rurality perspective, and before Heather disappears, I'm going to ask how they were all proofed to start with, save Heather doing that. But specifically in the southwest, it seems like there's a double jeopardy for residents. So there's pharmacy activity is lower with opening hours, accessibility is more difficult, and then if there's any correlation to having one car household, which tends to be more common in sort of more deprived areas and rural areas, and how all that links together to improve that service to the really sparse service in the southwest. But that is not to say that the service we get is not good. That the pharmacies that are there are great, but if you need something after 1 o'clock on a Saturday, it's a Monday morning. Right.
So really fair, Councillor. And I'm currently with my Chief Medical Officer visiting all of the 51 practices across Shropshire, Telford and Wrexham. And I was in Craven Arms yesterday and Bishop's Castle yesterday. So I did 2 practices there, and they were talking about some of the challenges in terms of how they use different pharmacies at different times because of that, the delivery services and everything that goes with that. But they were also really stark talking about some of the health inequalities when they just compared a simple shopping basket, compared with what that cost would be in Ludlow, compared with what it would be in Clun, compared with what it would be in Bishop's Castle, the reality of the rurality and how that plays out in terms of the impact. So I think we've got a great opportunity with the publication of the 10-year plan to really think about what this neighbourhood working means when you've got rural populations. And what this helps to give is another layer of knowledge and insight and awareness for us to think, what does that mean in terms of those communities and that rurality and the rural proofing piece that you talk about, which I think is what Claire and Nigel are also alluding and referring to. So the layers of knowledge and insight. Clearly, we've also got to make sure that these businesses are viable, because that's the other piece, isn't it? That you're right, Councillor, to highlight the double jeopardy piece. But then if the business isn't viable anyway, we then create even more of an issue in that in that space, or we won't get the interest or the invite with businesses coming and wanting to work in that area. So there's a lot to play through in that space as we start to look at the inequalities agenda balanced with the rurality piece, but that has to be part of, as we respond to the needs assessment, actually what does that look like and what does it mean for local people? Councillor, of course, as if I'm going to stop the leader from speaking.
I do have to go, but isn't this some of this about the script price that pharmacies get? And actually there's a further piece of work with central government about script prices. My sister-in-law was a pharmacist as well.
Which of course is nationally set and determined in terms of that, and that drives a part of the business model that sits behind that. And then it's also then what else are they able to sell that goes with it, that makes the shop, that makes the business. So how does it all start to stack up? So there is a lot in that. I think we've absolutely got to get into all of that with the neighbourhood working piece to really make sure that we're looking at all of the services in the different localities, and this brings to life some of the challenges that we're going to have to deal with and respond to, and that we need to make sure we come back to the needs assessment, because that's the principle behind the needs assessment: is what are the needs of the local communities, what does that look like, and how do we plan and arrange services to best meet those needs. So that brings that to life in that space. So thank you for that, Mark. I can't see any other hands or comments. So, Mark, any final comments from you, or are you happy that I put the recommendation to the board so that you can go out for the statutory 60-day public consultation? Yeah. So thank you for your time this morning. Board colleagues are supportive of us moving to the 60-day public consultation, and then with a final publication, and of course then we'll bring this back on a regular basis as well as we get into that neighbourhood working piece. Thank you for that, Mark. Okay, I'm going to move us on the agenda, and I'm coming to Gordon and Sean in terms of the reset programme.
Thank you, Chair. So we do have a few slides to talk to, hopefully, as everyone has seen our paper as well. So I'll just introduce the topic, and then I'll hand over to Sean to introduce himself and give an overview of what's been happening, reminder of what the programme is, and outcomes and impact. So just to set some context as well, as to what we mean by rough sleeping. So taken from the government report, Rough Sleeping in England, Causes and Statistics, they've defined rough sleeping as people who are homeless and sleeping on the streets or in places not meant for people to live, such as cars, doorways, parks, bus shelters and abandoned buildings. The reasons why rough sleeping or people may find themselves in that position are multifactorial, but there are common themes. Possibly unsurprisingly, these are linked to poverty, unemployment, accessibility of housing, barriers to accessing welfare support, relationship breakdown. And of course, all of these can be exacerbated by vulnerabilities such as health and substance use. What we know from the national evidence as well is that people who experience rough sleeping have some of the worst health and wellbeing outcomes in England. So a particularly vulnerable cohort, and a really important opportunity for us to have this grant funding to allow the project that we are running. What we do know as well is that the longer that someone experiences rough sleeping, the more likely they are to develop additional mental health and physical health needs, substance use issues, and increased risk of criminal justice system. So our project for Shropshire actually started in 2022 as part of a national initiative around ending rough sleeping and the improving outcomes for rough sleepers with substance use needs. Funding was provided by the Office of Health Improvement and Disparities, acronym OHID, and jointly funded by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So Shropshire was one of 83 local authority areas to receive funding, and it is recognised that this programme, not to sit in isolation, but to sit alongside other programmes that are already up and running, such as the Rough Sleeping Initiative, and this is one of the priorities for our Safeguarding Tackling Drug Alcohol Partnership Board as well. So an integrated approach absolutely is a priority for this programme of work. It is a multi-agency group, so looking at the holistic needs of rough sleepers, but we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. So as I say, it is grant funding. We are now into year 4 of receiving those funds. The name of the funding programme has changed slightly. It's now referred to as the Drug and Alcohol Treatment and Recovery Improvement Grant, which is quite a long title, so we often refer to it as DATRIG. So if you hear us speaking about DATRIG in the future, this is part of that grant funding offer. So for people to be eligible, shall we say, to access the Reset programme, they need to be defined as a rough sleeper or at risk of rough sleeping. So that can be people in temporary accommodation or people who are, as I say, on that risk register for potentially being a rough sleeper, but also to have a substance use need. Those are the key criteria for access. Sean, can I hand over to you now? Would you like to introduce yourself first of all, and then give us a bit more in terms of how the programme works?
Good morning, everyone. I tried to sneak in just after the start, but I didn't do a very good job of that. But my name's Sean Morris. I'm Strategic Commissioner for Drug and Alcohol Services. I joined the Public Health team last month, so I'm quite new here as far as I'm going to keep saying that for at least another 5 months or so. Yeah, I'll take you through who's involved also in the Reset programme here. And also just to mention, this is my first time as well as Wendy at one of these do, so I'll try and do my best for you. Okay, so a bit of the background. The organisations who are involved, this should be changing. Louise, if you... Oh, no, it's a bit. It's okay, thank you. So a few organisations are involved as part of the Reset programme. With you, who form part of the wider drug and alcohol service that many of you may already be aware of, looking at the Reset programme from a alcohol and drug treatment perspective. MPFT also form part of the organisations involved, and it's supporting particularly from a mental health support and psychology perspective. So we have a mental health nurse as part of the Reset team. Intuitive Thinking Skills are a lived experience organisation who operate across England and Wales, and they have complete courses of individuals, and you can come out with qualifications as part of that, but also support people with mentoring and navigating services around the individual also. So they're navigator and mentoring perspective as part of Reset. Willardine form part of the Reset, looking at supporting from a rehab and a day hab service. So they'll work with people who come on certain days of the week to the Reset service, and they'll take them to the Willardine farm, which is in Bridge North, and offer day hab opportunities to work and look at opportunities to develop their skills on their farm at Bridge North there. We've got Shropshire Council also form part of this, so supporting from a social work and housing perspective. At this point in time, we have an in-reach and outreach worker within the housing team to support from a housing perspective, but we're also at this point in time recruiting to a social worker post to support the Reset programme specifically. So we're kind of trying to cover as many angles as an individual who's in receipt of these services may need. And last but not by no means least, the Shrewsbury Arc are part of this service also, with a weekly clinic and a front door into the service as well. These aren't just, let's say, the main organisations involved with Reset. There's lots of signposting to and fro from a variety of other organisations around this also, around Reset. So when people are being supported by the service, what we look at as part of performance of the service metrics, we look at a few certain pinpointed areas. And when we say, I'll run you through these areas, when we say substantial progress, that means the proportion of individuals of those in treatment who've completed successfully or who are not using their problem substances or have substantially reduced. So they have completed, no longer using, or substantially reduced. So at the end of March 2025, there was around 118 unique individuals. Just under 30% of opiate users showed substantial progress against, as Gordon mentioned at the start, there's 83 other services across England that are supported by this funding from OHID. So against England, this offers some level of comparator. So we're trying to see how well the service is performing to an extent. So just under 30% of opiate users showing substantial progress against England's 24. 20% of non-opiate users, so thinking along the lines of crack, cannabis, those other substances, ketamine, using, so those users showed substantial progress, so 1 in 5 against England, which is slightly higher than what's happening in Shropshire. Lastly, 19% of alcohol users, so still 1 in 5, showing substantial progress against England's 27. So looking at those figures, I suppose one of the takeaways is that those individuals who are presented to service with a specific alcohol need are more challenging and perhaps more complex to support from our services perspective. What we found when the slide changes and wings its way over to the teams, should appear any moment now. Okay. We've got some challenges in learning. It's been in place for a few years now, and some of the things that we're picking up around how the service could potentially work better in the future, and the things that we need to progress. One of those being coordination of the service. So, as with any multifaceted and multi-agency approach, it has to be coordinated. And coordination of the reset program has changed over the course of time, and we're at this point in time, we've just recently been successful in recruiting to a coordinator specific to the reset program, individual who's currently going through our internal recruitment processes. So in the very near future, we'll have a full-time coordinator for the program, which will be great. But as with any program, as I said, it's difficult to coordinate multi-agency approaches. Funding allocations, as it's funded on an annual basis, that brings with it a list of challenges, and often we don't know whether there's going to be funding for the following year until much later in the current year. And that brings with it difficulties around the sustainability of the workforce and the wider system, and thinking about contingency for, we're supporting over 100 individuals at any one time on an annual basis to receive support from reset. So what happens if this service is unavailable? The optimist within, we go on the basis that hopefully we'll continue to receive some funding, but we'll also consider contingency as part of that. And also wider challenges to supporting this particular cohort of vulnerable people is the supply of temporary accommodation, although you mentioned earlier on in the meeting around how there's going to be more availability in the future, which is great. The move from temporary to permanent accommodation and service continuity for people, making sure that's in place. So when people receive services and have completed or have substantially reduced their substance use, or have completed the course of reset and are in perhaps permanent accommodation, that ongoing and continuity is vitally important for when someone does leave the program and continues to be supported, and what that looks like. So service continuity, and also sustaining winter provision. Reset forms part of a much bigger piece about how rough sleepers are supported and winter provision and what that looks like, and reset's involvement in that is also needs to be considered on a wider basis. Ambitions for the next year. So whilst we are funded on an annual basis, we've got ambitions in this year. As with most programs, you always look to strive to do more and go further and better. So at the end of, I noted that it was 118 in March. When we were looking at our ambitions to report into OHID, we did that in March, so we only had February's figures at this time. So that's one of the differences between these two figures. Our ambitions for this year is to reach more people and have a higher retainment in treatment, and making marked progress towards either reducing substances or completely reducing the use of problematic substance or alcohol use. Alongside the ambitions for this year, whilst we want to do more and go further with the service this year, we also have a couple of important pieces of work around what we do in the future. I mentioned before about contingency planning. If this doesn't exist, what's that impact on the people who are supported by reset? What happens then? What happens to, in some cases, statutory services around that? And if reset wasn't there, what would that mean? With the coordinator coming on board in the next few weeks, hopefully, what we do within the remainder of this year to make the best of the service, looking at the eligibility and pathways into the service is also key. Raising the profile and advertisement publicity of the service is important elements, and looking at the processes. We're doing some work at the moment of how people get into the service, how they're supported, and how they then exit the service, and making sure, like I mentioned, about service continuity once people have received a course of support from Reset, what happens next. And keenly forward planning for 2026-27, with the challenge of funding being on an annual basis. It's difficult to say, well, we're going to do this for the next X amount of years if we don't know that there's going to be funding there. So optimistically, what we'll look like, or what we'll look to do in the future, we'll be undertaking a review of the service, what's working well, what's a challenge, and what can we put in place for the future that might look different to what it is now. I'm not going to say we're going to do something exactly the same. We might not have the funding, for example, but what we'll look to do should be using the best value from the money that we are given as part of the grant to reach as many people as possible and offer the best quality of service at the same time. Whilst we talked a bit about challenges and opportunities and ambitions within the service, what I wanted to do was round off what Reset is with a short case study. Now, this was several pages that I tried to condense into a slide and a quote, which, as with any case study, this isn't going to keenly reflect exactly what was in there, but just to give you an idea of the kind of support that people receive when they move through the Reset service. So an individual fled a domestic abuse relationship and they ended up rough sleeping in Shrewsbury. This individual was assigned to the Reset programme and they were supported by the numerous organisations who form part of Reset. So Shropshire Domestic Abuse Services, the Intuitive Thinking Skills programme, who helped them form their CV and supported organising through phone temporary addresses, that kind of thing, and also had a mental health assessment with MPFT as part of that. So when I mentioned before about it's not just those services that work with individuals, they do signposts, they work with a plethora of services around that, and the Royal British Legion in this case was one of those. This individual was a veteran who was supported there by the Royal British Legion for accommodation for a couple of weeks, and the art provided food and support for them, as well as social prescribing, again another organisation I haven't mentioned but a part of Reset, working as a wider picture, supported them with food bank links. So following that, they were supported into further accommodation, attaining household items, also to help and support them live independently. Unfortunately, arrangements did not work. And I think this is something that we all see in our service. Sometimes things don't go as planned. And the complexity and vulnerability of some of the individuals that we do support, things won't always work out. And we just have to try and work with whatever's next best and trying to support that individual. But that accommodation didn't work for this individual due to a threat from the community and the previous relationship, and was then moved into a refuge. However, since then, the individuals remained abstinent from substances. They've been stable on a Buvidal injection, which is injectable buprenorphine, which is an opioid substitute treatment. With clinical support from With You as part of that, they've now signed on for their own permanent property. Their family relationships have improved, and this individual has regular contact with their daughter now, which they didn't have before, which is fantastic. And I'll share with you a final slide. I won't read it word to word, feel free to read it, but what this just reflected, and this was a quote from the individual who we were just looking at now, the Reset programme, if it wasn't for this service, it completely changed their life. They have managed to be supported by a support network and move through almost every aspect of their life had changed because of the Reset programme. Gave them the chance to move forward with their life, actually made them want to make those changes as well. And I think that's a large part of the crux of the service across substance misuse services. It's about a want, because you're battling against people who want to sell drug and alcohol to people who are addicted, or to those people, and that's our challenge, is to try and make a better offer, and which it was in this case for this individual. And they're very grateful to Reset, and yeah, they'd like to tell anyone that ever asked me that the difference the support has made to their life. So it's just a nice bit to sort of round off the support that Reset gives as a service. Gordon and I's and my details if there's anything on here that or around the Reset program that anyone would like to get in contact with. But I think as part of what the point of bringing Reset today was to share what we're doing, raise the profile a bit, and also raise that awareness and advise that we're at a point where we'll be reviewing the service and hearing health and wellbeing boards voices as part of that with that review, and what we do in the future will be important. Similarly as hearing about those who've received the services and their impact on whatever service will look like in the future. Thank you.
Sure. Gordon, thank you for that. And as we said this morning, the focus on vulnerable communities in terms of our main agenda items, I think, has come through really clearly in each of the presentations, but particularly, equally in yours in terms of these members of our community and the outcomes that we know are, significantly poorer than others, and our responsibility in terms of getting this to the right place. I talked in the previous session about my visit to the GP practices, and one of them this week was Riverside Medical Practice, and they were talking to me about the work that they're doing in this space on this agenda as well, given where they're located and the role in that piece. So that was really fascinating to listen to their work and where they've been in terms of some of their concerns at the start, and where how they're moving through that from a anxiety of being overloaded with work to this is how we can deliver some of this work in a fundamentally different way, but really have a focus on the outcomes and the individuals that they're working with. So that was also timely in terms of this conversation this morning. So let's open that up for conversations. And so, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a really interesting report. That was very interesting, and from a rural perspective, I represent Bishop's Castle. It's sometimes our sleepers are very well hidden in rurality. So I was interested in the report around the local response and the fact that you have a medically equipped van that visits market towns. What's the sort of frequency of that? Is it well used? Is it good value for money? And is it covered by the grant?
So, the vehicle that we have as part of Reset is also covered by the grant as well. The critical mass of rough sleepers tends to be around Shrewsbury. However, you're absolutely right that there is pockets around the county, and the ethos behind the van was to have sort of a clinically equipped van that went round at certain points. That hasn't been happening, as far as I'm aware, as often as it should be. However, I think this is part of the review that we'll do. We'll look to identify how that can be used in the best way that it can possible. And in order to help and support the more rural areas. I think as part of the review, what we'll need to do, and I suppose the ask is as part of that, is to how we feed in rurality elements into the review of how we look at the service of Reset as a whole, and what that often looks like for the other branches of Shropshire.
That might be something, Sean, Councillor, outside of here in terms of that rural proofing piece and the picking up some of the conversations to do that. How does that feed into the review might be worth happening as well.
Yeah, and also as part of the wider drug and alcohol services that we have as well. It was really, really interesting to hear Mark and Jess's part of their report on vulnerable people. When I started to think about selfishly from a supervised consumption and needle exchange, what does that look like across the whole of the county? Is it meeting the needs of the people who are across the county and not necessarily Shrewsbury? I mean, that's the critical mass, but how it meets that everywhere. But there's some fascinating stuff out there, and I'll be looking forward to reading through the needs assessment as well.
Very good link between agenda items. Claire, helping me as chair in that regard. Go far, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, this is another thing to link into the neighbourhoods work, I think, just thinking about the van and what are the wraparound services that we can provide through the MDT around rough sleeping and drug and alcohol services. We've got those neighbourhood approaches, particularly in Bishop's Castle and Ludlow. We've got them all over the county, but I think if we could more strongly link that into wider health services, primary care services, or the other support services that we offer, dental services, which I know are really important through drugs and alcohol as well, I think we could do something. So again, it's a really good link.
Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very comprehensive. Do you know if there's unmet need that that is not currently being adequately funded, and any thoughts about what can be done other than trying to bid for more resources?
Yeah, sure. I think there'll always be some level of unmet need. I think one of the things that's highlighted to us recently is there are people who don't want support, who could potentially be supported, but it's not the right perhaps time for them. We have a multitude of services within Reset, and making sure that those pathways within Reset are very clear in that you might not be ready to be supported by the drug and alcohol service, for example. However, there are other aspects of your life you might look to be supported as part of Reset. So I think it's about looking at the service, at the eligibility, at the pathways, and also I mentioned before about the publicity of the service, making sure that people are abundantly aware that there is a service here to help you, and you might not be ready to be helped and supported about some aspects, but we might be able to help you in others. In addition to that, as part of the review of the service, we'll look at if there's difficulty into referring into the services, if there's difficulty with reaching specific groups of people. Like Gordon and I were talking about this yesterday about a quality needs assessment and making sure that we're not disproportionately or adversely affecting specific groups of people, and that might be people in rural places or certain language barriers into certain services, for example. So whilst some exists, there will be unmet need. However, it's about making services available, I think, as best we can.
Lynn? Take one final comment and then we'll move.
Sorry if I've missed this in the paper, but I just wondered about the age profile of the people using, the programme. My background, again, in further education means that I know that sometimes a young person will end up in a very inappropriate environment as part of their journey through the support system. So I just wondered what the sort of age profile is of this group.
Not information I have to hand, but I'm more than willing to pick that up with you outside of here also. Something keen to understand as part of our review, what groups of people are we, like I said, about equality needs, are we meeting the needs of some people and adversely affecting younger people, for example, who might be sleeping rough? So probably something we'll need to do and speak to and work with our housing colleagues around whether we are getting specific groups of people through Reset and are missing disproportionately others. But happy to pick that conversation up with you outside of here.
Okay, thank you. Gordon, Sean, really grateful for your time this morning, as well as the presenters, and for the paper and for the presentation and for bringing the topic to life, raising that awareness, talking about the work that's taking place. Do feel able at any point to come back to the board with an update or with progress that's been made. And actually, I think the board would be keen to hear that. And the recommendation with this paper is the board's asked to note the contents of the presentation and report. And I think we've done that. Really important conversation, important work. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time. Okay, I am going to recognise we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 items, but these are for discussion by exception. So I'm expecting to move through faster. So having looked at the time, rather than take 5 minutes for a break and then go through the next few agenda items and finish relatively quickly, with the board's permission, I'm going to crack on and get finished and aim to finish before midday, if that's okay. That's no pressure on the people that are presenting the next 4 agenda items, of course, but I'd just like to manage expectations in advance. Looking around at colleagues that are presenting who are nodding at me in that way. So I'm going to carry on if that's okay. Laura, Better Care Fund, you've got two bits. Better Care Fund closing down 24-25 and Better Care Fund plan for 25-26. Do you want to take both of them together and link one to the other? Is that okay?
I think in the future, if there are, we'll into one report as well. So apologies. I'll take it as read. Many of you will be aware because we can, it's part of the as part of the approval, we have to bring this to Health and Wellbeing Board. This is the committee for that. So it's just what you've got there is just the end of year report for the Better Care Fund. And then the second paper then is this year's 1 year plan. So at the moment, we know it's just a 1 year plan. And we haven't had any signal of anything different from that point onwards. I think just, it's pretty straightforward in terms of summarising the highlights and some of the areas where we're going to be focusing this year. What I would say is just to point out, and we've picked it up on the first one, end of year report and into this year's annual plan, is that there has been an issue with the ERP. Is it the ERP? I'm asking my colleagues over the table there in terms of the data and performance. So we know that some of the metrics and stuff are off this year. We've highlighted that to the regional and national team and have said that we've not been able to set accurate targets reflecting upon that. So we think for this year, we're expecting a response, I think, from, I'm looking at Jess on the screen now, from 19th, from today, in fact, isn't it? We're hoping to hear from the national team in terms of whether it's been approved for our year plan. We think it will come with, yes, it will be, but you do need to look and probably put some targets set for Q2. So as always, we'll work with our colleagues to do that. We set that, we have monthly meetings with health colleagues on this anyway. So that's not an issue, and it's something that we predicted we would do. So there's nothing, unless anybody else is picking up anything. I don't need to prolong it, but any questions? Was that quick enough?
Good. It wasn't about making it quick. It was about by exception, if there is.
All about the quality.
Absolutely. Jess, and I can see that you joined us earlier. Anything from ICB perspective that you would want to add to that, or has Laura covered it?
I think Laura's covered it. I just add that our business intelligence team are working really closely with us to resolve the data issues and have been really supportive. So I just wanted to recognise that.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Laura. Any comments, questions on any of that? No. So we are approve the end of year template for 24-25. This is one of those submissions that has more spreadsheets probably than even my annual set of accounts that I'm going through and signing off, if I'm being honest. And I can see Laura and Jess both nodding in terms of that bit. And we're also asked to approve the 25-26 PCF plan in terms of the narrative bit. So I think we're saying yes to all of those. I think, Laura, Jess, it'd be really helpful, actually, at a future Health and Wellbeing Board session to move away from the templates and the sign-off bit and to bring something for discussion that says, actually, for the quantum of money that we use, what does that look like and what does it mean and how does that work, so that we get underneath it a little bit, because I think that will then help inform, given this is a 1 year plan, this is not about undoing the plan but an awareness piece, and then as the BCF iterates into 26, 27 and whatever that might look like, actually we're in a better place then to help shape and inform and work with you on it. Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I'm very conscious that we've got new committee members as well. So some of that background context might be quite useful at that point. Jess has started that, so we'll build on that. And again, we've had conversations, I'm looking over at Jackie around, getting some voluntary and community sector as well involved with some of that planning right up front. So absolutely, yes, Chair, we can do that.
Thank you. So if we could add that to the forward plan, colleagues. Look to my right, I can see scribbling happening, and so we'll build that in, because I think, like you say, that new committee members, new view, just bringing that to life, I think would really help. Thank you for that. Good. So on that basis, I'm going to carry on. Nigel, Claire, ICB update.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Taking the hint. There was a paper that I know the ICB comms colleagues shared with a quick update from partners across certainly NHS partners in the ICS. So I think Louisa and colleagues will just make sure it was circulated to Health and Wellbeing Board members. We'll just make sure that it's on the public papers for other colleagues. Just picking a couple of things, if I may. I think again we have been talking about a number of different bits, certainly locally. And I think it's important, that SAF and the Shropshire Community Trust, there's work going on now to investigate coming together as a group, and that is about looking at integration of pathways and supporting that focus, and particularly with the advent of the 10-year plan, that real focus on neighbourhoods. I think that's really important. But we're taking time to properly look at engaging with the staff and really building that from a staff point. I think second point is just from an integrated care board. Again, plenty of local, national discussion about this. There is focus on developing that reset of the integrated care boards. We're working very closely with our colleagues in Stoke and Staffs on that cluster, and I think it's been really positive. There's a lot of similarities in the approach and the focus, particularly around that neighbourhoods. And we've had, certainly the main hospital trusts work very closely together. MPFT obviously straddles both that geography, so some really good important parallels. And of course also with education, with Keele University playing a really important part. I think the final one, if I may, Chair, is just to signal the 10-year plan. I know you've mentioned it. We certainly, from an NHS perspective, we had probably been expecting it soon. I think we're expecting it soon. There was certainly very deep, there was lots of discussion referencing that at the NHS conference last week, from Secretary of State, from the Chief Exec. I think certainly it's been very, very well reinforced that the three shifts are going to be fundamental in that: the hospital to community shift, the analog to digital, and the sickness to prevention. Neighbourhood health is absolutely a national priority, and I think certainly if we then look at that and how that reflects, certainly from an integrated care system, working with Claire, with colleagues such as Rachel, colleagues in Telford and Wrekin, we have really carefully looked at our integrated care strategy and joint forward plan, and we believe it pretty well reflects that. Of course, when the 10-year plan comes out, we'll do further work in that regard. And certainly when we look at, and the note links to the next paper on SHIP, the integrated place, then again, there is a really, really clear focus. Partnership is absolutely king, and working at neighbourhood level with communities is utterly the right thing. And so the papers that we've discussed today just illustrate that. But that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nigel, Claire, nothing else to add in that space? No. I'm going to move us on then, if that's okay. So, Rachel, you've got two papers. You've got the health protection update, and then for information only, you've got the SHIP update.
Pressing the wrong button. Thank you, Chair. So, this paper, the health protection paper, usually comes under for information, but actually it's really important that we just wanted to highlight quite a few elements of this today. I think, if I may, I think there's a real strong theme that has come out today through the presentations, one around neighbourhoods, and particularly in our rural community, whether that be by bus, whether that be by physical hub, the work that we need to do and the commitment. That obviously the other bit is the partnership working and the difference we make when we work collectively in the way we do. And then the third bit is around promoting and raising awareness of the services that are available, but of the important issues. And this is why we brought this paper in terms of immunisation and health protection, because there's a few things in here that it's really important for us to flag. Generally, overall, in terms of, and we bring this to the board for assurance, but there's things we can actively do together in this space. Overall, our vaccination rates in Shropshire are higher than England generally, but we have inequalities, and we all know that. We did very well in COVID in our response to tackling inequalities and making sure that we got the highest levels of vaccinations we could, and doing the outreach work alongside some of the other work. This is a point where we need to absolutely do that again. And so there's some work in here that we are committed to ahead of winter as well, but around all of our vaccination programmes are there to support and protect people, and we want to get those messages out. So there's some great work, again, partnership work included in the report, in terms of the work we've done to our young people, around the MMR, around the HPV, to get out to communities, to talk to different communities and make sure that we're increasing uptake. We know that we're seeing a rise in measles, for example, so this is really important. to promote that awareness. There's also, you can see some of the other rates, and then there's some clear recommendations in the report in terms of promoting vaccinations and promoting the seasonal vaccines, and we're going to be doing more of this over the coming months. And we're using our buses, we're using our other approaches to get out to communities, and then obviously we've talked about pharmacies with all of the presentations. It's like we planned it, linked really well today. If you look at some of the work around the pharmacies, the contraception use, we've got these services, again making sure that people take up the services both remotely and in person, and I think that's really important. So I just want to introduce it in that way. I know people will have read it. Anne-Marie's here and might want to add some more about the work we're doing, and then obviously just if there's any comments. But I think our big message from today seems to be raising awareness, signposting to some of the services that are available in those offers.
Anne-Marie?
I think Rachel's probably covered most of it, and I'm happy to give any updates on any of the projects that we're doing if that's helpful.
Well, I would agree, Rachel, that the visibility of this and the promotion of it, and certainly a big strand, I recognise there's significantly more in here, but the community pharmacy piece, absolutely key role in all of this. And then a big pillar of this year's winter plan is going to be about the seasonal vaccinations. And so us working both in terms of staff and local people, us having a real focus of what does that look like this year is going to be more important than ever. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just make a suggestion that it perhaps goes into your Chair's report for the ICB board, just to make sure that all the providers that are around that table are kind of coordinated. So I think that communication out starting, we need to be thinking about starting now, don't we, ready for winter?
I think you just promoted me because you would want it in the Chief Exec's report, not the Chair's report.
Oh, sorry. But Ian or Pramford will do it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good call, actually. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments on that, Rachel, the ship update is there for information. Was there anything from that you particularly wanted to highlight at all?
I think the only thing I will highlight actually is a huge thanks again to partners. I know we've been able to find some money to support the work around prevention that we've supported as a board. The prevention framework that's come through some funds to the ICB. We've prioritised that already a little bit through SHIP for priorities we've previously identified that have been brought to this board. So children and young people social prescribing, building capacity in our community, and very important community and voluntary sector. But there is SHIP have gone out and asked for if there's any other areas all linked to prevention, all linked to the neighbourhood work as well. So again, just to make sure we can get a bit of boost behind some of that work. So a huge thank you for that being made available, and again that partnership approach.
Good, thank you. Okay, so there was any other business needs to be notified in advance to the chair. There was none notified, so I'm not accepting any other business, meant in the politest possible way. I've signed off the minutes. I just looked to my right to check that I've covered everything that was on the agenda. We've done everything that we needed to. And on that basis, I want to take the time to thank colleagues for your input and contributions this morning. Covered a lot, but a lot of good conversation in that space. And in doing all of that, I'm still giving you 30 minutes back as well in terms of your day. So thank you, everybody. I trust that people have a good, safe rest of the day and look forward to the next Health and Wellbeing Board. Thanks all. Could you let us know when we're offline, please?